Morning, everybody. Can everyone hear me? If you can you raise your hand? Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Okay, good. Yeah, it's just we do this on every webinar just to make sure that the sound's coming across okay. So appreciate it. Thank you so much. And today's subject will be kind of interesting with the advanced lookup feature. I think it gets taken for granted, maybe in a very basic use case gets used, but there's some other features inside of it that's pretty cool. So it'll be kind of exciting to talk about. And one more poll. Can everybody see my screen? If so, can you raise your hand again, please? Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Bill, David, John. Good deal. Almost ready here. All right. Well, let's get started. An introduction. My name is Michael Horn. I've been with Paladin going on 7 years now, and I'll be doing your webinar today on maximize productivity with the advanced lookup feature. So we're going to kind of talk about this one area of the package and to see if there's any new things that you can learn about it today. So it'll be pretty cool. So as an overview, what we're going to talk about is navigating to it, which is pretty simple, but we're still going to hit it. And then once we get there, how do we navigate through the advanced lookup? Ways to do different searches, display sorting options, kind of how it works, the power of it in invoicing, because there's some features in there that maybe are underutilized by a lot of people. There's some defaults that we can set up, which is pretty cool. We'll talk about those. We'll talk about some tips and tricks to get the most out of it. And then kind of talk about ways that you guys could leverage search results that maybe or you desire or they're very specific to you. So we'll kind of talk about how to do that as well. So first off, navigating to it. You can get to the advanced lookup in Invoice and Quote, Customers, Inventory, and PO modules. Every one of those modules has an advanced lookup feature. Now, what's inside of it is slightly different by the Invoice and Quote and Customers, but Inventory and PO, you're going to look at the same thing inside that module. So to do that, simply when you get into that module, hit F1. It's by far the easiest way to pull up the advanced lookup module. Now, can you mouse down there in the lower left and click on it? Absolutely. Or if you had a touch screen, you can click on that as well. So there's three options to do it. F1 is by far the quickest and simplest way to spawn the advanced lookup window. So here's kind of a breakdown of what you can search for by module. Okay, Invoice and Quote again has by far the most robust options to search for. Not only inventory, but customers and history. We'll kind of talk about each one of those respectively as the presentation goes on. So customers are very specific to pulling up customers. So that's the difference. In all of them but the customers module, you could pull up inventory. The customers module is meant to pull up customers by name or an address number, a phone number, rewards number. So definitely some other ways that you can get those results that you're looking for. When you go to those modules respectively, and you pull up the Advanced Lookup feature, and then you get some results. These are the headers that you get when you pull up those results. So in the inventory module, and you pull up, let's say you're searching for a hammer. Well, it'll display a list of all the hammers, and then across the top, it'll have these different fields that correspond to that individual hammer. So how many do you have? What part number is it? What's the manufacturer part number? What's the description, tax, and so forth. So you can see all the different criteria and sorting options that you have in the Advanced Lookup module. Now, one thing that's interesting is you could click on any one of these headers and sort it, ascending or descending, by just clicking on it. So let's say you wanted to sort by part number. You would then click on that, and it would sort it respectively. So that's kind of a nice feature to know. It's kind of like an Excel workbook. Essentially, you can sort those columns, and it'll just rearrange it by whatever option you choose to sort. And that goes with every one of those that you see in the customer, in the invoice, and in purchase orders. So don't forget, you can click on those headers and sort by any one of those fields that you would like to do. So how it works, again, press F1, it brings it up. So that immediately takes you to the Advanced Lookup feature, so you could immediately start typing. You don't have to click any other buttons. So you start typing what you want to search for. Let's say it's a hammer, and then click Find to bring up that request. When your item is found, you can press F8, click the button on the bottom right. You see that throughout the package in the bottom right corner, and that will select and put that on the invoice if you're in the invoice module, or bring it up in that as an inventory item if you're in the inventory module, or bring it up as a customer if you're in the customer module. So you can just click on that, or just simply double click the line item. That would work as well in the customer, inventory, and PO modules. Okay, if you let's say you're in the history tab and you double click the line, something else will happen, and we'll kind of talk about that later. But if you're in the inventory module, yeah, it'll bring up those items. And also, when searching for inventory in the invoicing module, you can enter a positive or a negative amount in the field to the left. Okay, and then you press enter and F8 to add it to the invoice. The neat thing about this, so let's say somebody comes in and they're doing an irrigation project, and they tell you that they're going to work with 3/4 inch Schedule 40 pipe. You could put 3/4 inch spaced Schedule 40 in the search field, search for those items, and then build that list of materials all at once. So it is possible to add quantities to more than one item in the current search results. So if they had a list of, how many 90s did they need, how many 45s did they need, how many couplers, how many lengths of 20-foot pipe, you can add all of those quantities at once. Again, hit F8, or in the lower right, click it with your mouse, and it will add all of those corresponding quantities and items to the invoice. So it's pretty neat. It's a nice feature. So the Advanced Lookup is really the most powerful in invoicing, and we'll kind of talk about that. So first off, it is our recommended or best practice to do returns and credits using the Advanced Lookup feature in invoicing. The scenario is this: what if they're returning an item that the retail price has changed, whether that's higher or lower? So when they bought it, it was one price. Today, it is a different price, okay, whether higher or lower. How do you return that item for that price? Well, you leverage the Advanced Lookup feature. So there's a history tab in the Advanced Lookup that you can display invoices by customer, which is pretty cool. Also, if you notice on the bottom of the receipts that get printed out in Paladin, there's a barcode. So that barcode is essentially an invoice number. That invoice number you can search for that in that same history view, and it'll pull up that item that you sold at that time for the price you sold it at. Put a negative quantity in the field for the return, hit F8, and now you're going to return it for the price you sold it at, not for whatever the current retail is. Now, I'm just doing an overview of that. We have knowledge-based articles and tools to help you with best practices for returns. So if that's something that you want to know more about, just contact us, create a support ticket, search the knowledge-based article. There's different ways that you guys can get help on that specific subject. But the advanced lookup feature is our best practice for returns and credits. Something else you can do is investigate historical purchases. So you can either do that for everybody, or if you select a customer, before you go into the advanced lookup window, you can filter the purchases by that customer, which is pretty cool. So if you look at the display on the slide right here, you see it says invoices, and it says all invoices. If you don't search for anything and put anything in there and hit find, what it'll do is it will bring up a list from the most recent to the oldest invoice in the advanced lookup window under the history tab, which is pretty neat. So you can see all their sales history right from the invoicing module. You can also obviously do part number searches and find very specific times when this customer bought this particular item. You can accomplish that goal as well. Now, earlier I talked about if you double click it, it's actually not going to go to that item, something else will happen. Well, what would happen? Well, it's either going to pull up a PDF copy of that invoice, and you can choose to save it, email it, print it, whatever you want, because it's a PDF document. Or if you have a setting set up in Paladin, it will send it automatically to the printer for an automatic reprint. So that's pretty cool too. You can do invoice reprints right from the advanced lookup window inside Paladin. Again, this is an overview for knowing what you can do. If you want to know more about any of these, please search the knowledge base. And if you can't find it there, or you're having challenges, let us know. We can help you out with that. But there's a lot of power, as you can tell from the advanced lookup window in invoicing, to not only find parts, but look at historical invoices by customer. So it's pretty neat. Now, maybe some of you know this and maybe not, but advanced lookup actually has some options that you can set as defaults. So when you first go into the advanced lookup window, let's say in the Invoice and Quote module, and you hit F1 and it pulls up, it's going to default to a keyword search by default, which is what most people would typically like. That way, if they type in hammer, it's just going to look for that keyword and pull up any items respectively. Let's say you wanted to do a class search by default, or a location search, or department search. You can do all of those things. So here's where you would do that. You would go into File Setup, Company tab, and look for the Advanced Lookup section, okay? And you can see these inventory default search types. So if you were to look, let's say in the customer default search type, you can see the different defaults that you can select. Now in the customer module, it defaults to all. As you can see, it's highlighted in blue down there, but you can have it default to the name, the account number, the address. That way you don't have to go up there and change it every time if that's something that you do. So that's kind of nice to know that you have these options to just default to whatever search criteria that you want, either by the customer search or the inventory search. And again, you can see the ones for inventory: class, department, location, supplier. So here's some tips and tricks to get the results you desire in the advanced lookup. Less is more. So the concept behind that, if I just type hammer, I can get a whole bunch of items that have a hammer in the description. But let's say I say hammer 16 ounce, obviously then it's going to be a little bit more refined and look for that specifically. So if you want a broader search, type in less. If you want more refined results, obviously type in more with more detail. So that's kind of how that works with the advanced lookup. Now, once you type in, again, let's use the example of hammer. Let's say you type in hammer and you get a whole list of hammers, and let's say there's 150 of them. If you hit F1 again, you can refine that search and search inside of that window. So you can look for keywords inside of your results. So that might help when you're looking inside and looking at all those 150 items. So search for your primary search, hit F1 again, and then you can refine your search as a secondary search a little bit more. So that's a nice trick as well. Now, I don't know if you know this, but you can add a website address in the suppliers tab under file setup in Paladin, and you can actually spawn vendor sites from the advanced lookup window as well within the frame. What's nice about this is some stores don't have locked down, let's say, internet browsing on their computers, okay? But maybe going to a vendor's website, a supplier's website, is something relevant, and that's okay for your employees to do. You can spawn that website right inside of Paladin. They can't go anywhere else on the web. It only takes them to that website, and they can navigate around that. So that's nice. You can still keep your security and in place, but yet still allow them access to the supplier's website if you so desire. Again, we kind of touched on this earlier, but you can double click on historical invoices to generate invoice reprints from the invoice module. So that's a really nice feature. You see that throughout our package. If you're in the customer module and you're looking at sales history, you know how you could double click the item and it brings up a PDF or sends it to the printer. The exact same results will happen in the advanced lookup window as well. So it's a really nice feature. Now, I talked about how if you double click it, you can send it to a printer. Here's how you can do that. On the bottom bullet point, it says set reprints above to print on the original printer rather than a PDF. So you'd go to File, Setup, look for the Invoice Store tab, and then you find the option that says Use Receipt Printer for Invoice Reprint. So then rather than bringing up a PDF, it'll just send directly to the respective printer that you have set up. So that's a nice feature as well. Or if you notice it's printing to the printer and you want it to spawn a PDF, that's why. It's because that setting is enabled. So then you could go there and disable it. So I talked about how to get some very specific or custom searches that maybe you want to bring up every time because these set of products are something that you sell a lot of. Well, as you know, if you set up a location for an item, setting up locations in stores is something that not everybody does. I know it maybe seems like a daunting task, but you'll be able to leverage more functionality in Paladin, not just in the advanced lookup window and other reports as well, other modules, but definitely in the advanced lookup window because you can do specific searches by location and bring up those items, which is very helpful. But other than location, you can do classes. Now, most items have their default class set by their primary supplier. But with Paladin, you can have multiple classes. You can have up to 3 classes and subclasses by a particular item. So what can you do? Well, you can create a secondary or tertiary class, essentially, and put a subset of items in there that you always want to bring up in a search. And you would add the subsequent parts to that class in class 2 or class 3. And then that way, when you're in the advanced lookup window and you bring up the classes and you bring up that specific class, it will always bring up those same set of items, even though maybe they're scattered throughout your store. They're not in a logical location area because they're scattered throughout. So you can see how you could create some really cool custom searches or custom results by using and leveraging the class feature. And subclasses are also available in the advanced lookup window under class. So that's nice as well. And again, we talked about using F1 to further refine your search results. So again, that's a nice feature to be able to highlight. So this was kind of a quick overview. Didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but this was an overview of some of the features inside the Advanced Lookup window that you can use and leverage inside of Paladin. Again, as mentioned earlier, our knowledge base has more detailed and in-depth tutorials and step-by-step instructions on how to leverage best practices for returns or pulling up invoices by customers. So that's go to the knowledge base for that information. Was there any questions on the topic that anybody had? If so, just send a chat. And while I'm waiting for that, I also want to highlight, just to keep in mind, you might be hearing this quite a bit, but we just want to make sure people are staying ahead of it, that the Windows 7 sunset, or essentially end of support by Microsoft, is coming up. So if anybody out there has Windows 7 machines, it definitely would behoove you to look at the upgrade path to get ahead of that. And that way you're not left in a vulnerable state. And speaking to that, we're actually going to have a webinar on that topic, on that subject. And I do believe that's going to be our next webinar, is going to be on the subject of Windows 7 sunset or end of life, essentially. So that'll be a nice one as well to alleviate anyone's fears of that. And we're here to help in any fashion that we can with that project. So. Well, I don't see any questions. Thanks everybody for showing up. I really do appreciate it, and hopefully we see the value in leveraging some of these enhanced features in the Advanced Lookup module. Thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next time.